Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Appreciate you raising your health IQ with us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. You know, we are now watched and downloaded in more than 130 countries around the world, making the Exam Room one of the most downloaded nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet. And we could not do that without your support. So thank you very much for being here with us today. And speaking of today, we are going to start with ulcerative colitis. You know, millions of people suffer from ulcerative colitis, and it just seems like more and more and more people are diagnosed with it every year. And that means that more and more and more people are suffering from it. So what causes it? And more importantly today, what can help? The Gut Health MD is here making a house call with some of those answers. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz is in the house. He's got the DL on UC. Also going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag, and that means your questions will be answered. So if there's something that you would like to ask Dr. B, go ahead and post that in the comment or in the chat. We're going to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. We have some stuff in here on hiccups already, how your microbiome might change your tastes for different foods, and how can eating the rainbow improve your gut health? All of that plus more of your questions. So keep on posting them there. Plus, Dr. B, we have a very special and tasty announcement about the long-awaited follow-up to Fiberfield toward the end of the show. So let's kick everything off and welcome Dr. Bulsiewicz back to the Exam Room Live. My friend, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm grateful for these wonderful people who are here with us today. I want you to know that you are looking at a seasoned warrior literally right now. All right. I am being battle tested today as we speak. My car broke down yesterday.
Uh-oh.
So I am devoid of transportation. And my son had a tough night last night, woke up with some bad dreams. And then today I woke up. So it's kind of exciting. There's a lot of good stuff in here because I'm here with you, Chuck, which I love. I look forward to this every month. But this morning I gave a talk to the Medical University of South Carolina GI division. All right. I talked about personalized nutrition. We're doing PCRM now. And then this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern time, I'm actually doing a webinar about weight loss on forks over knives for people who are interested. So it's a big day today in the Bulsiewicz household.
Could you fit anything else in, and will you be able to get to bed tonight?
I am on call. I also have 2 consults. So I'll be sneaking in those patients as well. So we have that in addition. And as for going to bed tonight, I probably will turn off my phone and go to bed at 7:30 if I can.
Outstanding. You're going to need that rest, man. Best of luck to you. I'll be keeping a good thought all day. So let's go ahead. I mean, I don't want to waste your time as full of a plate as you have. So let's just dive right in there. Open up the doctor's mailbag. Let's prescribe some health advice for the good people. And we're going to start with a question from Kiana about ulcerative colitis. She wants to know, Dr. B, what can she eat to help with her ulcerative colitis?
You know, the challenge when you have ulcerative colitis, and I want to, by the way, bring in Crohn's disease as well, because these are what we would describe as inflammatory bowel diseases, IBD. So these inflammatory bowel diseases that include ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, they are inflammatory conditions. Your gut is on fire, all right? And the reason that they're happening is that there has been a disturbance of the gut microbiome. So because of this disturbance within the gut microbiome, your immune system goes on the attack. And the immune system's not actually attacking you. There's no evidence to support that. Instead, the immune system is attacking your microbiome, and the fallout is the damage and harm that is done to your intestines. Where there's inflammation, there can be ulceration. People can experience bleeding. Typically, there is diarrhea. And they can be dangerous conditions in certain circumstances. So now, how do we eat with these particular conditions? I want to create a separation between the person who has active flaring disease, there is inflammation, versus the person who is in remission. Remission means that there is not activity of this disease, that if we look inside the colon, look inside the intestines, we are not going to see any ulceration or damage to the body. All right. So in a person who has active flaring disease, the important thing from my perspective as a gastroenterologist is I want to get you into remission. And ultimately, medications may be required in order to accomplish that. I view this as conceptually similar to having a forest fire. Okay. So, in the forest fire analogy, the forest is your microbiome. It's lush, it's diverse, it's beautiful, but when it's on fire, it's getting burned and being destroyed. And we need to put the fire out. And if you have a forest fire problem, you don't start planting trees, you put the fire out and then you plant the trees. Minimize the damage, put out the fire, then move on, plant trees, and rebuild the forest. All right. So, in a person who's flaring, they may struggle to process and digest high fiber foods. They may struggle to process and digest raw foods, raw plants. Doesn't mean that they're stuck being incapable of consuming these things into the future. But for right now, we have to simplify and make things more gentle and easy for the gut. So we want to start with things that are perhaps low FODMAP and well cooked. So I'm thinking about soups. Like soups are an excellent place to start because they are already sort of pre-digested in a way. I'm thinking about smoothies. You break down the food partially, make it more digestible and easy for your body, easy for your gut. So that's where we want to start. But you want to take yourself and get yourself into remission. And then when we're in remission, the microbiome is the way that we keep ourselves in remission. And the more successful we are at introducing these foods that you have struggled with. So make no mistake, you need these foods. You just may not need them today. It may be more of a long-term goal to reintroduce these foods and bring them back. And so when you get yourself into remission, then you start this process of rebuilding the gut microbiome. You are planting trees. And the way that you do that is by bringing back diversity, but you have to do it slowly. Slowly reintroduce these foods. Pay attention to the feedback you are receiving from your body. Allow them to build up over time as your gut becomes stronger. And when you do this, ultimately, you will find yourself in a place where you are consuming a diverse, abundant, plant-centered diet that is high in fiber, fiber being the key to suppressing the inflammation. And when you do that, you will put yourself into deep remission. And a deep remission is the closest that we can take a person with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease to a cure. When you are in a deep remission, you are not flaring and you're not close to flaring. That's where we want you.
Yeah, matter of fact, earlier this week, up on the Physicians Committee's YouTube page and or YouTube channel and Facebook page, had an interview with a woman who had ulcerative colitis for years. I mean, she was diagnosed with this way back in the early 1990s and suffered for like 2 decades or better. Finally changed the way that she ate and has just seen such a dramatic improvement, and now has this feeling like she's reclaimed her life. You know, it worked better than any treatment possible, and she's starting everything with what's on her plate, and that has just paid major dividends. Couple of quick follow-ups for you here, Dr. B. You mentioned smoothies being one of the foods that people can try out as they're trying to improve their gut health here. We always get this question, and you being the fiber specialist that you are, when you blend up something, you break the foods down to that extent, does that affect the fiber content?
It doesn't affect the fiber content in the sense of like the grams of fiber is the grams of fiber. You don't diminish the number of grams of fiber that exist within the smoothie. You may be biochemically altering the fiber to some degree. And so it could affect things. Let's pretend that you make a smoothie that's like literally all fruit, right? It may affect you where if you were to eat that fruit rather than blending it, it will not spike your blood sugar as much as if you were to put it into a smoothie, puree it, and then consume it, right? And then so you're losing some of the protections that you get from the fact that fruit contains fiber and that fiber inherently is a part of sort of the matrix of the food. That, you know, at the end of the day, smoothies are a great way to deliver a variety of plants, the phytochemicals, the polyphenols, the fiber to people who need them and may not be able to tolerate them in other forms, or they taste good. And some people, this is the path that leads them into a more plant-centered diet. So from my perspective, I celebrate smoothies. I think they're great and I consume them all the time.
Well, in that case, I'm just going to declare this National Smoothie Day, and we should all celebrate it, my friend.
Plant that flag.
In 30 seconds or less, you also mentioned FODMAPs a little bit earlier. For those who aren't familiar with a FODMAP, what is that?
Yeah. Big topic, 30 seconds or less. Okay. FODMAPs are the fermentable parts of our food. So, like beans contain FODMAPs, whole grains like wheat contain FODMAPs, onions, garlic, some fruits. The point being, these are not actually bad things, they're good things, and they're actually good for our gut microbiome. But when consumed in excess of the amount that you can tolerate, by the way, lactose is a FODMAP. I don't recommend, like, if you have digestive symptoms, get rid of dairy immediately. That's the first thing I would do. But um, these things in general, we don't want to get rid of the beans, the garlic, the wheat. We don't want to necessarily get rid of these things. What we want to do is we want to consume the amount that our body is capable of tolerating. So, and I know that you have an announcement at the end of the broadcast that is very relevant to these FODMAPs that we're talking about, Chuck.
Oh, that is a good tease. So stay tuned,
Little tease.
everybody. By the way, Tofu Tuesday says it's double Dr. B Day. She's going to be on the Forks and Knives webinar with you this afternoon, as will Annette. Also want to say hi to Lisa, who's watching right now in San Francisco, and Carroll, who is in Tennessee. And I hope I am getting this name right. Kaori, checking all the way in from Zambia today. Which is just fantastic, all the way over in
Nice.
Africa. See, raising the health IQs around the world, Dr. B.
Love
That's
it.
why I love this show, man. Let's do something here. Take a question from Jackie. Jackie has a good one. Do you need to, quote, eat the rainbow in order to have a healthy gut?
I would say so. I would say so. So this concept of eating the rainbow has been around for a while, and it's a simple way to kind of take the complexity of nature and bring it into your body in a simple fashion that is so good for you. So every single color that exists in nature actually reflects specific phytochemicals that are in the plants. That's why these plants have these different colors. And many times these are the polyphenols. Polyphenols are antioxidant compounds, meaning that they basically have an anti-inflammatory effect in our body. They can have beneficial effects way beyond that. And you find them in plants. And by the way, polyphenols are also prebiotic. They feed our gut microbiome. So with regard to eating the rainbow, when we opt for all the different colors, we are inherently choosing to introduce variety and diversity into our diet. And we know that variety and diversity is very important to our gut microbiome. So it's just a great, simple way to approach that.
Celine, how much does microbiome affect our taste buds? So why do our tastes change as we're trying to improve our gut health?
I think that so there's more research to be done in this particular area, but I think actually they affect our taste buds quite a bit. So, quick anecdote just from my personal experience. If you went back 10 years ago, and I shared on my Instagram a photo of myself from 10 years ago last night. If you went back 10 years ago, like my favorite meal for a celebration was a ribeye steak and a glass of wine. And what's interesting is that when I changed my diet, I experienced dramatic health benefits. But the thing that I did not expect is that my taste buds changed. And there was this day, Chuck, it was probably like 2015, where I had the worst week ever. I'll spare you the details, but I had the worst week ever at work. And I got to the end of the week, I limped to the finish line. I said, "Man, you deserve a treat." And I went to a steakhouse, and it had been definitely more than a year since I had a steak. There it is. There is my picture from 2012. And it was like 2015, and it had definitely been more than a year since I had had a steak. And it used to be my favorite. And I went to the steakhouse. I ordered the ribeye. It came out, and I was like, "It smells weird." It tastes different. It's not appetizing to me anymore. I don't not only am I not craving it, I'm actually turned off by it. And so I left. I paid my bill. I covered up this steak because I didn't want them to ask me questions like, "Oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" Let me cover it up, pay my bill, and I got out of there as quickly as I could. So we actually have studies that suggest that our cravings are in part motivated by our microbiome. You take people who love chocolate, and they have demonstrated that the gut microbes in these people who love chocolate are actually producing a chemical that makes them crave that. The other thing along the same lines, a little bit different than just our taste buds, Chuck, but there's actually research to suggest that our pheromones, the way that we smell, and our attraction to others is motivated by the compatibility of our gut microbiome. And they've demonstrated this in like animal models that these animals choose a partner based upon gut microbiome compatibility, and that these microbes actually produce our smell, right? Our pheromones. So, like, why do we kiss? This is a preview. I don't know if we're going to be back on Valentine's Day or not, but I'm going to sneak this one in as a preview for Valentine's. Why do we kiss? Why do we do that? Why do we express passion or love for another person through that actual act? And the suggestion is that it's actually sharing of microbes. So 100 million microbes are shared with a good, passionate kiss. Why do we high five? They haven't studied this, Chuck, but I seriously I love high fives. It's one of my favorite things to do. You ever see me, give me a high five.
You're a high five
But
guy.
I'm a high five kind of guy. I like the top secret high fives, the really cool ones that go on for like a couple minutes. But anyway, why do we high five? I'm convinced that the reason that we shake hands, the reason that we high five is human touch and the sharing of microbes that takes place.
That's wild. See, that is wild. I was not expecting that detour on the show today. I love
Curveball.
science. I mean,
Yeah,
just let's nerd out, man. Nerd out
totally.
forever. So good. And now, Dr. B, for something completely different. Question from Laura: what causes hiccups and what might help? This is one of the most searched topics on Google. I'm telling you, so many people get the hiccups. So many people have no idea what to do beyond those old wives' tales.
Yeah. Hiccups are the reason that it gets searched so much is that people are not finding solutions to their hiccup problem. And I can just tell you from experience with patients that one of the worst things that a person can experience in terms of damaging their quality of life is persistent hiccups. I had a patient once, Chuck, who he was a military veteran, and he was still in the military when I was taking care of him. This was in Savannah, Georgia. And he literally had persistent hiccups from the minute he woke up to the minute he went to bed for months. And so now what causes this? There's a number of issues. This is what makes it challenging, is that when you're kind of in these watershed areas between specialties, it's hard to get the medical system to really give you the support that you need because it requires a doctor to actually step up and like try really hard. But hiccups can be related to lung issues, to the diaphragm or irritation of the diaphragm. So, and that could come from the lungs, irritation of the diaphragm, but it could also come from the abdomen. If you have an abdominal issue, it could irritate the diaphragm. But the most common thing that I come across with hiccups is acid reflux. So where I typically start with my patients is I will treat them for acid reflux. And with reliable treatment, try to determine whether or not it improves their hiccups. If I go back to the veteran in Savannah, Georgia, who had these persistent hiccups, this young man was suffering to the point that I'm not exaggerating to say that he was suicidal.
Mm,
And we ended up treating him for acid reflux, and he got better.
wow.
So it was a dramatic case, dramatic recovery.
Wow. Wow. I'm happy for him. I think I saw on the news one time they had a young woman on there who had been suffering for months, if not close to a year. And they were talking about the effect that it had on her life. And this was a live interview, and she's hiccuping the whole way through. Funny thing is, not once did they talk about her diet during that. And this was a number of years ago. I wasn't really hyper focused yet on nutrition, but I think it would have stood out to me if they would have really taken a look at what it was that she was eating. It was just a wild interview. I mean, this poor girl was in high school at the time and just
Yeah.
had no kind of quality of life. So my heart
Oh,
definitely goes out to them. Let's see if we can turn things around and make people a little bit more happy. Who doesn't like good spices, right? Let's take a question that came in at 12:14. Someone is wondering what spices can affect gut health.
many of them. Many of them. The cool thing about spices is that what you taste, like that sort of powerful, provocative taste, is typically coming from a phytochemical. And the phytochemical is also what happens to provide benefit to you, your health, and potentially your gut microbes. So, like, take turmeric, for example. Turmeric contains curcumin. All right, curcumin, turmeric is a rhizome. It's in the same family as ginger, and the turmeric contains this phytochemical named curcumin, and curcumin has very powerful anti-inflammatory properties that we believe is also beneficial to the gut microbiome. For example, a person who has ulcerative colitis, one of the things that I would consider in those patients is, this is, by the way, not medical advice. This is just me providing education and speaking about these areas of interest. But in those patients, I would consider turmeric supplementation to have that curcumin. It has anti-inflammatory properties. My father was 6'7", and when he was alive, he had horrible arthritis of his knees. And I actually put him on turmeric, and he got himself to a point where he was able to avoid surgery for a very long time as a result of that.
Get out of town. That's incredible. Do you know if that would improve a number of forms of arthritis, even maybe osteoarthritis?
Yeah, it could certainly help with osteoarthritis. Yeah, what's interesting about turmeric? So you think about curry, right? So a curry will typically contain turmeric. What's interesting is that curries contain other spices as well. Think about, in India, they have this spice blend called garam masala, and every single component of the garam masala has beneficial phytochemicals. Well, with the turmeric, if you take it in combination with black pepper, it actually increases the absorption of the turmeric by 2,000%. That is not me
Ooh.
inflating the numbers. That's real. 2,000% better absorption when you sprinkle some black pepper in with your turmeric. So here's the tip for everyone at home. If you're doing turmeric, make sure it includes black pepper. If you're doing curry, make sure it includes black pepper. Boom.
There you go. All right. And it's really turmeric is not one of those spices that I find to be particularly overwhelming. You can subtly add it to a lot of different dishes and it won't affect the flavor too much one way or the other. So big fan of it myself. Let's mix it up here. Take a question from Michael. He needs some help. My goodness. At 12:13, he says, I'm currently in 3 days of plant-based eating and the bloating is real. He says, would
Yeah.
doing a mixture of rice and beans be easier? Half of my plate is still greens. Just need to make sure that I eat enough for weightlifting. Oh, Michael, my heart goes out to you, buddy.
Yeah. So, all right. So, Michael, here's the scoop. When you transition your diet, anytime you have to understand your gut microbiome 3 days ago was designed for whatever the dietary pattern that you previously had was, right? And it was very efficient at good at dealing with that particular type of dietary pattern. Doesn't mean that that dietary pattern was in your best health interest. It just means your gut microbes were adapted to it. Well, you're making a change, and making a change in your diet requires these microbes to change as well. And they need an opportunity to catch up. And the harder that you push in an all at once type of move, the more of a strain or stress you will put on these microbes to try to keep up with something that they're quite simply not prepared for. So I got the idea based upon the way that you framed the question that you're a person who's into fitness. This is like going to the gym. You wouldn't go to the gym on January 1st and slap, like, the heaviest weights in there all on the rack and then go for it. That's how you hurt yourself. you would go on January 1st and you would start by easing into it and finding what your body is capable of doing. And once you know what you're capable of doing, you start to push it. You start to push it. And what you find is by pushing it at the gym, you build strength. And by basically challenging yourself, the challenge leads to strength. So when you transition to a plant-based diet, you want to ease your body into this. And you can go too hard too fast like this and experience a lot of gas and bloating because your microbiome is not prepared for what you have asked it to do. So the flip side is to go a lot easier. Cooked foods. We talked about soups, right? Cooked foods, starches, because starches will help to maintain the caloric intake that you need, particularly as a guy. We need more calories because we're bigger people, generally speaking. So starches, and then look at foods that contain fat, which will be higher calorie plant foods, but that's something that you need right now to make sure that you're getting an adequate amount of calories as you're making a transition. So like, for example, avocados, seeds, nuts, things like that.
Man, the chat room, they love some science. Steven flat out just says, love science and net. We produce a chemical that drives our cravings. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I also want to say hi to Ayad, who is tuning in from Tangier, Morocco. That's definitely a new one. I'm going to put a pin in the map for that one. That's pretty cool. But let's take a question from Lydia, who is tuning in from Montreal, Dr. B. See if we can get her some help. Generally speaking here, she says she's struggling with gastritis. The doctor put me on PPI meds. She says that she's vegan, wants to know what she may be able to eat to find some help, though.
It's a good question. So, hello, Lydia. I grew up about 2.5 hours south of you. If you drove straight south into New York, you would find where I lived, Route 87. So, Montreal's a great city. Love that place. In terms of what you need to do with gastritis, ultimately, gastritis is a bit complex because there's a number of different things that can potentially contribute to this. And it's a little hard given the information for me as a GI doctor to say, oh, this is what it is, go do that. What I will say is this: gastritis can be related to motility, stomach acid production, sensitivity of the nerves. And in order to maintain these things, motility, stomach acid production, sensitivity of the nerves, we want a balanced diet that supports a healthy gut microbiome. Ultimately, the gut microbiome are the stewards of our digestive health. And so we want to fuel them. So my focus would be on moving towards a more plant predominant diet that is diverse. That's where we want to ultimately go. But it is a process that may require you to work with a registered dietitian or be a bit meticulous in terms of keeping track of what foods you're eating and how they make you feel. Because ultimately, if a food makes you feel unwell, it doesn't mean that we eliminate it. But we want to be conscious. We want to build consciousness of the food choices that we're making and how they make us feel so that we can moderate where we need to. And that way, as you move along, you are building strength within that gut microbiome and allowing yourself to get to a place where you have the motility, the stomach acid production, where your stomach is as healthy as it can possibly be because you have a good microbiome. That's where you want to be.
Let's go back to turmeric here for a second. Jesse's asking about it. Brooke is asking about it. Anna is asking about it. So how much turmeric do you recommend somebody eat every day?
Oh, gosh. Chuck, I don't remember the exact numbers in terms of milligrams for supplementation. So I would have to actually dig into the medical literature to give an answer to that. But my experience is that, so it depends, like if you're treating a specific medical issue, you may want to talk to your doctor about it. You may want to look into this in more detail and talk to your doctor after you look into it. But in terms of like the routine person who's taking turmeric supplementation, here's what I do. I go to the store and I get the golden milk spice blend, which includes turmeric plus a couple other spices, including black pepper, right? And I love spice blends because I feel like I am giving a gift to my microbiome. And each day, you see, I have this water bottle here. Well, it's not just water. I actually make myself a little concoction that includes a greens powder. I'm not trying to replace salads. Don't you worry. I'm not trying to replace salads, but I do a greens powder with some turmeric. That's my golden milk spice blend. some ashwagandha, some maca, right? And I put that in here and I bring it to work and I love it. I feel great. It energizes me. So that's what I personally do, and I probably use about a teaspoon of it per day.
There you go. Let's change it up a little bit. Take a question from Natalie at 1229. A lot of people wonder this. They count the number of plants that they eat every day, the different varieties. You want to get to as high a number as possible. It's kind of like a little bit of a game. Natalie, though, is wondering, do different forms of the same food, for example, cherry and Roma tomatoes, count as separate plants?
Yeah. Natalie, hello. Thank you. I love this question. So, Chuck, if you go back to Fiberfield, my first book that came out in May of 2020, I introduced the idea of plant points. And this is just my way of gamifying this. So I think that eating should be fun. We should look forward to meal times. We shouldn't live in fear of our food. We shouldn't feel that there's rigid rules that are stressing us out. That's not what it's about. So plant points is just my cheeky, fun way of us focusing on dietary diversity at every meal. You get a point for every single plant. Now, what has happened is that people have exposed these sort of like watershed gray area questions of, does this count as a plant point? Does that count as a plant point? And I want people to understand that at the end of the day, dietary diversity is where you want to be. Okay. And so I would never exclude dietary diversity on whether or not you get a plant point, right? And consistency is important, but this is just meant to be fun. So don't be too rigid or strict about the rules of what is or is not a plant point. Certainly don't get into a shouting match or hopefully not a fist fight over what qualifies as a plant point with your friends, because this is just meant to be fun. But to answer this question, Roma tomatoes, like one tomato versus another type of tomato, if they're different species of tomatoes, then that's 2 plant points. If it's the same species of tomato but different colors, I wouldn't call that different plant points.
We still have people tuning in from all over the world. I see Scotland is in here. Israel is in here. By the way, Joe from Scotland says, love the Snickers bites that you talked about on the previous show, the 3-ingredient Snickers bites. By the way, those are a hit in this household as well. Those things are so, so good. I believe that recipe was in Fiberfield, and hint, hint, there may be more recipes coming. So stay tuned for that.
Let's take a more recipes coming, and there may be more recipes relevant to that specific recipe that you just mentioned, Chuck. We will continue. We'll come back to this again towards the end of the program.
Okay, now you done threw the tease my way, and I'm all in for this now. But before we get to that, let's take a question from Carroll. She is wondering whether freezing fruits and vegetables can kill the all-important microbiome.
Gosh, that's a great question. I haven't seen a good study to answer that question. I wish that I had, because it's such a good one. So I thank you, Carol, for asking that. Here's what I would say. This is the important thing. Okay. There are microbes that exist on our food. There's a number of different ways that you can process your food that will remove those microbes. If you cook something, you are removing the microbes. So, that doesn't diminish the quality and value of the food. And I don't believe that the only way to eat your food is raw. I don't believe that to be true. I think that it is good to have some of your food raw. I don't think that all food needs to be raw. And so to answer this question, I don't think that I would shy away from frozen food. The other thing to bear in mind, there's a lot of places in this country where fresh produce is not readily available. But frozen produce is. And frozen produce is often more cost efficient for people who need that. And that's a great thing. And I fully support that. And you shouldn't feel bad in the least, because guess what? Guess who's eating frozen vegetables on a routine basis? This guy. So the point from my perspective is that we want a diverse, abundant diet, and it's okay to cook. It's okay to freeze. It's great to eat raw. All these things. It's okay.
Let's see here. A question from Charmaine. Can stress still cause an ulcer if you are eating a healthy diet?
The idea of stress causing ulcers is very interesting. The majority of ulcers in the United States, Chuck, are caused by one of two things. It's not to say these are the only two, but the majority are caused either through the use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. This is number one. So we're talking about things like ibuprofen, naproxen, over-the-counter pain medicines. Tylenol is not included in that for what that's worth. And so that's the number one cause. The number two cause is a bacteria that can live in the stomach called H. pylori. So these are the top two. Now, stress and ulcers. Does stress cause ulcers? Well, I know that stress affects the gut microbiome. That's very clear. And if you affect the microbiome, I could definitely see where that would have an effect on the function of your gut that could result in an ulcer. The origin of this idea of stress causing ulcers, because if you went back to before you and I were born, Chuck, this was thought to be the number one cause of ulcers. And that actually, it's interesting from a historical perspective. It goes back to World War II and a research study that was done in London when London was getting bombed by the Germans. And they found an increased prevalence of ulcers during this period of time. Now, are the ulcers literally due to stress in that setting? Could it be that their diet was restricted because they're getting bombed and they don't have the ability to go and get food on a routine basis in the way that they would under normal circumstances? Are there other changes, disturbances of their sleep because there's bombs being dropped? Clearly there's other things that could potentially be in play. So it's we're going back to old school research from the 1940s that if you take that research and you try to publish it in 2022, it probably doesn't go very far because there's too many questions that are unresolved. So end of the day, the short answer is I do think that stress can cause an ulcer, but I think it's a little more complicated than what we saw in that original study in 1945.
All right, and let's grab two more here really quickly before we talk about that big exciting announcement. 1211, let's rewind the chat by a half hour. 1211, Mommy Vegan Nummy, wondering whether alcohol or coffee can kill beneficial bacteria.
We think that coffee actually is good for the beneficial bacteria. In fact, there's a research study done. So, Chuck, I know that you're familiar, but many of the listeners may not be. I'm on the scientific advisory board for a company called Zoe, and it's a personalized nutrition company. And we do really, honestly, quite powerful nutrition studies published in the top medical journals. And there was a study published in Nature Medicine almost a year to the day in January of 2021, where the number one food in association with a change in the gut microbiome was coffee. In other words, if you were a habitual coffee drinker, it was very reproducible that you would have specific changes in your gut microbiome. And these were changes that we would describe as beneficial. We think the reason why is that coffee contains polyphenols like chlorogenic acid. And these polyphenols, it's a bit of a theme for today that we've been talking about. They escape digestion in the small intestine, arrive in the colon intact, and they actually have a beneficial effect on our gut microbiome. So polyphenols are prebiotic. Coffee contains prebiotics. The problem with coffee is not the coffee. It's the stuff we add to it. That's the issue. Now, alcoholic drinks. If you look at people who drink red wine contains resveratrol. That resveratrol is also a polyphenol. Number of health benefits to it. Also prebiotic. So you will see that people who consume red wine, there are some changes that I would describe as beneficial to the gut microbiome. Here's the issue. You drink yourself to the point that you have a hangover. I am convinced that the hangover is you causing acute harm to your gut microbiome. So if alcohol is consumed, it should be in moderation, but I am not encouraging consumption of alcohol for the purposes of enhancing the gut microbiome because alcohol is a carcinogen. So by the way, full disclosure, I do consume alcohol occasionally. So I don't want it to sound like I'm being hypocritical here. I'm just saying we have to have an understanding of what this is. And resveratrol is not just a red wine thing. Resveratrol comes from the red grapes. You can find it in a number of other foods, including peanuts. Peanuts have resveratrol. So snack on some peanuts.
Oh man, who doesn't like a good, handful of peanuts, man. You got to be careful with those things. They are so addictive. I'm one of those guys that, I mean, if there's peanuts in the house, that's kind of a danger thing, man. I'll do peanut butter and I can be okay with that, but if there are just peanuts around, I get a little bit dicey. Love them so much. Which actually leads to an important final question for today. It comes in at 12:25. It's from Laura of Fitness. And before I ask this, I will say that an estimated 3% of people will suffer from a binge eating disorder in their lifetime. That's according to the National Institutes of Mental Health. So a lot of people probably could use some help from this one. And Laura Fitness's question at 12:25 is, how does binge eating affect the gut?
There was a study. So, binge eating is its own condition. It is an eating disorder, according to the DSM-5 criteria. It's a bit different than anorexia, where anorexia is a hyper-restricted pattern of eating, and binge eating is sort of the impulsive, overwhelming, aggressive consumption of food. Um, so often followed by purging. I have not, Chuck, seen a good study in terms of the effect of binge eating on the microbiome. And I do expect, this is just me speculating, just to be upfront and clear about this. I haven't seen a study on it, but I would fully expect that we would see changes in the gut microbiome in people who binge eat, that they would not be something that we would describe as beneficial, that it would be out of balance. The word that we use is dysbiosis. And I think it's actually very possible that the microbiome is in part connected to the manifestation of binge eating. Again, I don't know this to be true, so please don't take it as such. This is me speculating from an expert perspective based on everything that I've seen. We do have data from the University of North Carolina where they have a great, like a very well-respected eating disorder clinic that I actually used to work with when I was a GI doctor there. And they studied people who have anorexia and discovered that there was deep disturbance of the gut microbiome. Now, speaking from my clinical experience, people that have disordered eating patterns of any variety, they struggle with digestive issues. It's almost 100%. And in the process of trying to heal their digestive issues, I think it's very important to pay attention not just to the food that you're eating, but to actually directly addressing the disordered eating pattern. That's part of healing the gut. I would say the same thing to a person who's been the victim of trauma or abuse. We have to address the trauma and the abuse. We have to address the disordered eating pattern in order to get you, to lift you to a place of proper health throughout your whole body, in order to allow your gut to heal properly. So, a bit of a long answer, Chuck, but one of the things that I will say is when it comes to, so I am very sensitive to people that have disordered eating patterns. I take care of them in my clinic routinely. I've been affected in my personal life by people who have had disordered eating patterns. I'm very sensitive to these issues. And one of the things that I would say is that one of the things that I like about the approach that I preach is, like, I don't want people to overly fixate on their food. But at the end of the day, I want to heal your relationship with food, because people who have disordered eating have a broken relationship. They have a broken relationship with their food, and we have to bring them back together because we all have to eat in order to thrive and live our best lives. And so one of the things that I love about the dietary pattern that I propose is that it's not about restriction or avoidance or making you fearful of your food. It's about finding love and gravitating to things that you enjoy, and abundance and variety, and getting rid of restrictions. So that's one of the things that I feel really good about with the work that I'm doing. So
Yeah, and as somebody who personally has suffered from it, yeah, I definitely had binge eating, not the purging, and that's how I got up to 420 pounds. I mean, I was a fast food addict. I mean, famously, I tell the story, I could not go a single day without dropping $20 at Taco Bell. My relationship with food has completely changed. And I don't think it takes a doctor to tell you that my gut health has dramatically improved since that relationship with food has changed. I'm eating all kinds of different foods now, and my gut does not have anywhere near the same type of issues as it once did. Like, I got a healthy gut now. I'm not
Yeah.
spending so much time in the bathroom, in agony, making deals with God if the pain will just stop. Like, I was bargaining with God just to get the pain to stop, but it never did because I kept fueling that with Taco Bell and pizza and all those unhealthy things that were putting me in that unhealthy position. So, yeah, maybe more research is needed, man, but I think that there is a huge, huge, huge connection there. And before we get to the announcement, Holly up in Tecumseh, Ontario says, thank you both for doing these live podcasts and taking questions. She says this is her first time attending live and she is so excited to be here. So I'm happy that Holly is here. Thank you so much
I
for
hope she
being
comes
here.
back. Thank you, Holly.
Now, big announcement time. Big announcement time. You have the long awaited follow up to the book that is over your shoulder right now, is coming out soon. What is your big announcement, Dr. B?
Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so excited to tell you that I've been working very hard behind the scenes. You couldn't see it in 2021, but I was hard at work creating something that I honestly believe is very special. So I've created the follow-up to Fiberfield, and it is a cookbook, except it's actually so much more than a cookbook. So just to put this into perspective, there are 125 recipes in this book, created by Alex Caspero, who is the registered dietitian who created the recipes for my first book, Fiberfield. If you liked that food, you will love this food. All right. So 125 recipes, full color photos. You can see some of the photos on the cover right there. And it's a beautiful book, which I think is great. But here's the thing, Chuck, these people, they come in and they see me in my clinic. They're sitting across the room from me and they're desperate for solutions. And I know that the food that I could put into a cookbook is not going to be tolerated by a very large percentage of my patients. And that's not fair. And where is the cookbook for these people who suffer with food intolerances? Where is the methodology that they can apply to their digestive issues to heal, get back to loving their food, and tolerate it without any pain, to get back to enjoying it? It's time to level the playing field. It's time to bring the joy back with our food. It's time for us all to be able to sit around the table together and not have one person who's not able to participate because their gut health problem is holding them back. So the Fiberfield Cookbook, which is coming out May 17th and is available for pre-order now, is the book that's going to do this. It's an entire book, 11 chapters. I went way overboard in writing. I think I caught my publisher by surprise because they thought I was just going to turn in some recipes and some pictures, and I wrote a book. And so basically, you're essentially getting a book and a half because it brings together the best of a cookbook, 125 recipes, full color, but it also has this entire methodology that is not in my first book. By the way, they're all brand new recipes except for two. We can talk about that in a second. But brand new recipes, but a methodology built into the cookbook, protocols built into the cookbook that if you simply read it and you follow through on what I teach, I honestly think this is going to change people's lives.
Yeah, well, they're not just recipes. If you go to Amazon to make the pre-order, and by the way, there should be a link right now for you to pre-order the book in the show description. So go ahead and click on that. Reserve your copy today. The description there says that they are irresistible recipes, and I'm sure that they are. And then it goes on to say that there's a lemon lentil salad in there, cheesy broccoli potato soup. Here we go, maple peanut granola. Hello. And then you got to tell me about the chocolate cookie milk. We don't need the recipe. We can't divulge everything. Just tell me if it tastes good, Dr. B.
Oh my gosh, it tastes so good. And there are wonderful desserts, right? Like Mexican hot chocolate brownies, which are made with black beans. Yo. There are
Give up.
wonderful main courses. So like I love East Asian food. So like there's a tofu banh mi. There is Nashville hot chicken. We have Nashville not chicken. So if you like spicy, it's there. So the recipes are completely off the charts. It's going to blow people away as a standalone cookbook without the methodology and the gut health knowledge that I share. I think this would be a great book, but I think that's so next level because if you or a person you know is suffering with food intolerances, they need this book. They're never going to get it from their doctor. And the things that you're being sold on the internet are fake. This is the real thing. So I'm very excited about the potential. My wife actually thinks this is a better book than Fiberfield. And real quick, we mentioned this before. So we were talking about the Snickers bites. For people who are not familiar, here's a free recipe. Snickers bites, you take a date, open up the date, and you wipe a smear of your favorite nut butter, whatever that may be, in the middle of the date, and then you drop some dark chocolate chips on top. Okay. And if you want some sesame seeds, tastes like a Snickers bar. If you doubt me, try it and then come back and let me know what you think. But this recipe, Chuck, was so popular with Fiberfield. Like people freaked out about the Snickers bites. So I was like, you know what? We're bringing them back and multiplying them. So there are now 4 different varieties of Snickers bites. Biome broth, super popular. People are freaking out about biome broth. I get like literally every day people are posting biome broth and tagging me. Guess what? Biome broth is not only back, there are 7 varieties of biome broth in this book. So I can't wait to blow you guys away with this book. I think you're going to absolutely love it. And pre-ordering is actually quite helpful right now because it makes sure that we have an adequate supply of books for people who want them when the book actually goes live. So if you get a chance to pre-order, you guys, I really would be grateful if you would.
I got my pre-order in, and once it gets here, I'm going to promptly ship it down to you. I'm going to ask you kindly to autograph it. And then if you could send it on back, that would be fantastic.
I might fly up to Virginia and show up at your house to sign that, Chuck.
Well, you could do that, but I don't live in Virginia. So good luck.
Shoot, Maryland. Sorry. But anyway.
Just a little bit north of that. But yeah, man, that is super exciting. I know that you have been working on this for so long in the background, and you and I have talked about this. And I know that this is a project that you are super passionate about, as you said, and one that you should be proud of because it is going to help so many people and deliciously at that, man. So I'm excited. When is the release date, by the way?
May 17th. May 17th, the book comes out. Yep.
There it is, man. I don't want to wait till May 17th, man. But get the pre-orders in. It is I'm knowing that this is definitely going to well be worth the wait. I just can't wait for this, man. If for nothing else, then the Snickers hacks. I mean, it is I have heard from so many listeners who have been like, those Snickers hacks are the greatest thing since ever. So I'm pumped for the new twist on that, man. And I'm really excited as always that you are here. You've been so gracious with your time as you run the gauntlet today. I know that you have this Forks Over Knives weight loss seminar coming up at 4:00 Eastern. So, I mean, you are just a health warrior, my friend. So thanks for carving out a little bit of time for us.
Let's go.
Throw up the guns, man.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for coming and hanging out with Chuck and I today. I'm always grateful for the activity in the chat box. You guys are awesome, and it's just been a privilege to be here every month with you, Chuck. I really am grateful.
And I do so appreciate it more than you would know. And if you are watching this right now and you enjoyed it, feel like you've raised your health IQ by a point or two, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like the video below. And bonus points, if you head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify, look for the Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Subscribe there as well. And that is particularly important because every new subscription and 5-star rating helps us climb a little bit higher in the podcast rankings. And the higher we climb, the easier it becomes for people who really need this information the most to find it. So just by subscribing and leaving that 5-star rating, you can seriously help change somebody's life for the better. And it only takes a couple of seconds. Links to do that right now are in the show description as well. But for today, my friends, that is all the time that we have. I want to say thank you to the crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen. You guys are fantastic. Again, Dr. B, thank you so very much for bringing your wisdom to the show today. And to you, my exam roomies, thanks for hanging out with us today and making the exam room what it is. And for everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We'll talk to you again soon. But until then, keep it plant-based.